You would think that with an increased adoption of agile methodologies in most companies, agile transformations would be commonplace and that success stories would be easily found. However, research from KPMG paints something of a different picture. We see that 74% of organizations undergoing an agile transformation do not agree that their organization supports an agile culture. Only 13% of respondents in the KPMG survey state that top management fully supports their agile transformation, and 62% of top management believe agile has no implications for them. Now, for most companies, revenue growth is important, so introducing increased efficiencies in their marketing, product development, for being agile, and the use of AI is attractive. But I wonder, is there a intersection between AI, being agile, and marketing that can actually drive revenue growth? A guest is an authority in the AI space, and so perhaps can shed some light on this. We'll do that in just a bit. Hello, and welcome to the Predictable B2B Success podcast, supported by Sproutment.com. I'm AI coaching. Our guest today is Garik Tate. Garik, you're an AI futurist, investor, and AI strategy consultant. Your expertise lies at the intersection of AI, IQ, and EQ. You actually work to make companies more valuable to institutional buyers and increase their profits with AI. You're also the CEO of Valhalla, which helps companies, I believe, grow their impact with the right product development teams. Now, you've had well over decades worth of experience as a successful early founded company, spanning software development, outsourcing, publishing, and also, of course, sought after speaker on AI's features, practical applications business. So I'm curious, Garik, was there a specific incident or event that triggered this desire to dive into AI and all that it means for business? If so,
Yeah,
what was
there was a very specific memory I have. It was a interview with the founder of Valve. I believe his name is Gabe something, but the founder of the gaming company. And he said that programming is nothing more than teaching the dumbest thing in the world how to be smart. And I think that's in a way technically true because at a base level, computers are nothing more than like ones and zeros. So what's a one? A one is I exist. A zero is I don't exist. And so this idea that it gets more complicated when we add if then statement or if then gates and load more complexity into it. But at its base level, it really is just those ones and zeros. And so the idea that we're then bootstrapping intelligence from that base layer up is, in my mind, the coolest game in town. Would rather be doing absolutely nothing else. And so AI is really the bleeding edge of that. And I'm a big fan of Valve for tuning me into this thing that's really defined my career.
so? And I'm also curious, given your journey to date, what would you say is your personal area of strength?
I'd say my personal area of strength is something of a research hound. So I like to understand a problem from as many perspectives as possible. I think when I was younger, I'd always tackled things a little more from an abstract point of view. And now, a little bit further in my career, combine that with a lot more of the practical side. There's a great quote: in theory and practice are the same. In practice, they're not. I'd say my biggest strength I rely on is just an ability to research things from both theory and practice.
In that area of strength, what would you say is something that businesses don't know but should?
That's a great question. I I think that the fundamental issue that businesses are in, or I would say entrepreneurs are in, 'cause I work a lot with entrepreneurs, they are essentially playing arbitrage with the future. So the definition in medieval times of an entrepreneur was someone who works with arbitrage. They buy something at a low price to sell at a high price somewhere else. And I think the modern day entrepreneur, especially those in the tech industry that use agile, that use AI, they are playing arbitrage, but they're playing arbitrage with the future. That, so to speak, there's something in the future that's going to exist. And
Mhm.
what your job as an entrepreneur is to bring that into reality now. Problem is, no one can predict the future, at least with the level of accuracy that we would hope. And it's a game of chance, and it's a game that requires a lot of ability to handle uncertainty. I think that agile ultimately, when it's at its best, is about handling uncertainty. But to answer your question, how does the perspective of research support entrepreneurs or work with entrepreneurs be doing better there? I think that the biggest thing is to not try to figure out everything by yourself. There's a lot of wisdom out there from fantastic people. And if you can be tapping onto the wisdom of other brains, then you're going to get a lot further than trying to reinvent the wheel.
Mhm. So that you brought up this idea of being agile, which certainly is, I would say, hopefully well understood, especially in the tech space. However, some of the stats certainly would indicate that there's probably a bit of an issue, maybe more of a cultural issue within these organizations. What's been your experience and perspective, given that you work with a lot of entrepreneurs and organizations, especially in the product development space, in terms of the overall mindset of incorporating agile and supporting?
I would say I'm I'm a huge fan of the concept of agile in theory, and I work with a lot of clients in software development and support them building out their product teams, helping them also coaching them through how to lead product teams effectively with agile. The challenge that I see happen quite a bit is that clients understanding the concept of agile use it as sometimes an excuse not to think something through to the degree that is really necessary. So they leave certain stones unturned, so to speak. And while it's true that agile works at its best by not trying to answer everything, instead trying to get direct data from the client, that can become a mask for leaving things to future versions of yourself to solve. And if we know anything, probably the future version of you, they might be more knowledgeable, sure, but they're probably going to be just as busy, if not busier. And so taking a lot of attention in the beginning to really think through your software product, really think through what you want to build can pay massive dividends, even while still enthroning market data and customer response as the most important guiding light. I think there's a way to
Yeah.
have it too.
Could you give us an example to help us better wrap minds around that?
Yeah. So around how to get a clear picture in your mind as well as get customer data.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Absolutely. We are in our company a really big fan of the domain driven design approach. It's a pretty lightweight way of thinking through the consequences of a design without over engineering it. So we use this in most of the projects that we are engaged with and the products that we build. It boils down to first thinking about the user journey, thinking through every step that the user will be taking and not just assuming, oh yeah, they're going to register and log in and that's going to be that, but actually like placing it out and then coming up with the consequences of each step in that user journey and how that affects the back end of maybe not just your software, but also maybe your service or your business. And sorry, I just now had a little pop up there. As I was saying, domain driven design says to then think through the consequences of each step of that user journey and how it would impact the back end of your business with post-it notes. Silicon Valley is a huge fan of post-it notes. So this is something you would do up on a whiteboard using different color-coded post-its. And in this process, actually, I think the key to doing this process really effectively versus ineffectively is to use a high level of discipline when it comes to language that you use to describe the application. If you're going to call the user a user, always using that word, not then also calling them a customer or a client, but always using the word user. If you're going to call this page the dashboard, don't call it the reporting page later on. It's always a dashboard. And providing a lot of discipline there can really get the team on the same page. And it's a fantastic way of understanding what it is that you're looking to build without trying to engineer everything to the nth degree.
So if I understand this correctly, you always suggested that while agile might be understood to a point, there is a lack of effective practice of agile within organizations. There perhaps a key stumbling block, if I can put it that way, is perhaps
Yes.
this lack of consistency of common terms and lack of consistent
Language,
terminology.
yeah.
That they would use across the entire organization so that everybody's on the same page, which I would think is certainly a key stumbling block. How would you?
Actually, there's another factor, if
Yeah.
it's all right, I just want to throw in, is that Agile will work at its best if the thing you're gonna be putting in customers' hands is a narrow test. Instead of thinking of it like an MVP, I walk my clients through, instead of thinking about an RAT, a RAT. So a RAT is a riskiest assumption test. So you take what is biggest assumption you have that has the most amount of risk, and you try to build a product that solves that particular problem. And if you're not going to design everything that's necessary to test that particular riskiest assumption. So by narrowing down your scope and fighting scope creep, you're going to be in a good place to be utilizing the best ideas from Agile.
But I'm also curious, how would you ensure that everybody in the organization is actually using the same terminology right across the board? Because even if you're running a risk assessment, RAT,
Yeah,
if the
RAT,
whole
riskiest assumption test.
a risky assumption test, there is a danger that perhaps some people would understand perspective of the test differently compared to others. So I would think that language really needs to be one of those fundamental underpinning factors to ensure the overall success of not just the test, but the entire project assignment as a whole. Is there a framework that you use or to ensure common understanding?
I think that you're hitting the nail on the head here, which is the name of the game is people, because people are always going to be your biggest asset. So how to get all the people pointed at the same thing? You can only maximize your people if everyone's fighting for the same concept, which means the picture in your head has to be the same. I think of it like you have, especially if you're the entrepreneur, you're creating a guiding flame. You need to hold the candle in your mind up to the candle inside their mind long enough for the same fire to start burning there, and then you're both, moving forward with that light. And I think that the biggest lesson we've had in that has definitely been a focus on using assets. Is to say that clarity is only represented and captured inside of assets, preferably at least two assets describing a similar thing. So that could be a product roadmap as well as a Figma design, or a user journey diagram as well as a product roadmap, or what have you. So by focusing on the assets that you can create and getting your team to either co-create them with you, or to be walking through your team on every single edit that is made to those assets, and make sure those assets are living, organic documents that stay updated across time, and staying consistent with those, that in my experience has moved the needle really more than any other methodology I've ever found for getting the right message across consistently.
Well, bro, and as you were in the product development space, you're looking at obviously printing on things like rats, but is there a framework that you would should suggest that companies think through in order to ensure that their sprints are kind of moving the needle in the right direction?
Can you repeat that last part? You broke up there for a moment.
Yeah, so that is there a framework that you use or recommend to companies in order to ensure that their sprints are moving the needle in the right direction?
Perfect. In order to make sure the sprint is moving the needle, I think so much of this is in the preparation before you write the first line of code. And for that, it's to think through what is the core value that your product brings that other people are not. Take AI, for example. When AI came out, and actually even now, like I think every single day, new AI products have come out that they are really just a wrapper around ChatGPT. That someone has built some new application that's just extracting the value of ChatGPT, which is really to ChatGPT's credit that's such a versatile and powerful machine. So people are then thinking, oh, I'll build this new thing that hasn't existed before. But you're not really building anything. You're just putting a wrapper around this thing that now exists that didn't exist before. And so thinking through what is the core value that you really are going to provide. So some of these products are really impressive, like maybe just a better user interface that properly captures your prompts. Maybe it's a middle layer, like something like Jasper, that adjusts your prompts in the middleware to make the production of the output higher quality. So in Jasper, it's basically just ChatGPT, but specializes in making sure ChatGPT writes consistently good sales copy or consistently good blog posts.
Mhm.
So you have to think about what is the value you're providing, but also know that reality has at this point is always going to be so complicated. You can't do everything at the same time. Find tools out there, find libraries and pre-written code, open source tools, et cetera, et cetera. But then when you're looking at this collage, think through what is the value you're providing that you can provide better than anyone else. And maybe it's just because you see the problem better than anyone else sees it. And once you know what that is, try to scrape away as much of the unnecessary features from your vision to get to testing that core value as fast as possible. And typically, each step towards that delivery of core value is going to be another riskiest assumption test. What is your riskiest assumption? Build something that tests that first. Can we connect with the API? That's our first assumption that's really risky. All right, yes, we can. Okay, what's the next risky assumption? Will people pay for this? Let's create a landing page that accepts credit cards. Okay, what's the third assumption? So on and so forth. And taking steps that way, I think, is the right agile approach before you get a lot of market data.
Would that be a key part of, I believe, what you call the product blueprints?
Yep. So our proprietary method combines design sprint along with domain-driven design is called Product Blueprint Sprint, or PBS. And so we walk people through designing their product and then build out a roadmap that's based around this idea and fighting scope creep by making sure we know exactly what's a core value first.
Okay. And how does agile, if at all, come into all this?
So agile is, for me, just the simple idea that future you is probably smarter than current you. So therefore, you can hold off on making certain decisions, or else you can pivot your decisions once you get real user data. So in my mind, that clicks into its highest value when you're actually getting user data. And there's a lot of ways you can be getting user data better, setting up tools like UserSnap or certain tools that automate accepting customer feedback. And you can also install tools like Hotjar or other things to analyze customer journeys and how they're interacting with your app. I recommend really any software development company to have a member on their team, typically the product manager, but have someone on their team whose job includes reviewing customer data to inform product decisions. So agile works at its best when you've hit that level. Before you have something in people's hands, though, you can't really do agile. So therefore, everything agile teaches is just get something in people's hands as soon as possible. So it's trying to skip that problem from my point of view.
So correct me if I'm wrong here. Is there a significant educational aspect to the service that you offer as opposed to perhaps other software companies?
Yeah, I think that there definitely is an educational aspect to the service that we offer. It's funny, the longer my career has become, the more I am finding the value in services you can provide that don't take any educational sell. That's just flatly, hey, here's the value, and there's no need to explain it. I think that so much business is winner take all. You have to get a lot of things right in order to get the lion's share of the rewards. And I think most folks that have done exceedingly well with very little effort are the folks that have engineered themselves in a way to be tackling a problem clearly that does not take a lot of educational selling. That being said, that the reason why educational sales still work and you can still make a lot of money with them, is that if somebody could solve the problem for themselves using the stuff they already knew, they would already be. So if you really want to solve a big complex problem, therefore provide a ton of value and then capture a ton of value, there's probably going to be a very large educational sale aspect to it. Or at least it's easier to provide that service while providing a ton of value and being able to capture a ton of that value. So I feel like there's bands of entrepreneurship, but that's how I think it through. I don't know which direction you want to take that conversation. That's my high level thought on the concept, but where do you want to take this conversation?
It's interesting that you see that, and obviously that if there is little education required, these product or service could be viewed as more a commodity. But just as you do volume sales in such instances, that means for a period of time before it will need to evolve or die off. So with this idea of education, obviously AI has come into the picture. Most people will be familiar with ChatGPT that you mentioned, and the ability to produce at least rough drafts for content to help with the education process. But is that perhaps just base level application of AI in marketing from your perspective, and other ways in which we can better use AI in the whole marketing and education space?
So in the marketing and education space using AI, so I want to modify that question slightly. So the one of the chief questions that I see is how can you use AI? And if you're pitching using AI to clients, how much do you have to educate them about it in order to make that pitch clear, right? And so to answer the second part of that question first, I think there is a ton of wisdom in the fact that AI is very good for YouTube thumbnails and for podcasts and things. But when entrepreneurs actually want to put down their money and want to buy it, they're buying the value that it provides. They're not buying using something fancy for fanciness sake. And so making sure that the product actually solves the problem and provides real value, and having case stories and a portfolio showing off how it does that is still always going to be number one. And that's truly just sidestepping the educational issue as much as possible. And the more you're able to do that, the more your business will run on easy mode, as opposed to having to like hunt down every single client or put in a lot of effort in that sales process. With that being said, AI is a very powerful tool that can be used in a variety of ways. And our approach does have a rather large educational aspect, because we subscribe to the theory of constraints when applying AI to business operations. So this was a theory of constraints by Eli Goldratt. He wrote the book The Goal. And the idea there is that your business is constrained by your biggest constraint. So if you remove an obstacle or remove a bottleneck that is higher upstream to your biggest bottleneck or your worst bottleneck, you've made the problem worse, not better. Even though you've improved your business, you've actually made your business typically perform less well, because all you've done is you've put more pressure and more overwhelm on the highest bottleneck. So the approach that we like to take is to look at the business holistically and find the areas in the business that are the biggest bottlenecks and seeing how to add AI there. Our criteria of figuring out, and that does take, sadly, an educational sale part. So I'm trying to figure out how to adjust that, because it does take a fairly big deep dive. But we approach it systematically once we find the largest constraint, which is this problem something that can be boiled down to clear inputs and outputs. And I think the reason why AI suffers a lot in a lot of circumstances is that the inputs are not as simple as we think. I might not get a very good result from an AI accountant, because when I talk with my real accountant, I'm not just sharing my P&L statement, which can be fed to an AI. We're also talking about goals, about risk tolerance, about he sees my demographic, he sees so much more about me than just is shown in P&L statements. When we're working through it together, we know what our goal is, and all of that is context of the decisions, suggestions, and work that he does. And AI does not can take all that in, but it's going to be so much more than just a P&L statement. And when I'm looking at a problem inside of a business of how can we add AI here, the question is, can we capture as enough of the full context in clear inputs with clear outputs on the other side. And if you can solve that, you can triple a business's bottom line by removing its largest constraint. And you can have just insane returns for the effort you're putting in.
That's really interesting, but I'm curious, how do you go about identifying these constraints?
That's a fantastic question. Honestly, I think that's a great question. I don't think I've ever given like a succinct answer to that. How do you find the biggest constraints inside of a business? I think it boils down to two sides. The first side is finding, okay, so every sales journey is a series of percentages, how I look at it. You get, let's say you do an outreach of 100 prospects, and then 50 of them open up the email, and then 30 of them book the call, and then 20 of them show up, and then you're able to close 5 of them. So there's percentages at every one of those points. And you have to ask yourself, are any of those percentages off from where we would expect? If you doubled any one of these numbers or added an extra 10% on any one of these numbers, how much would that drive the performance of the business? And generally speaking, taking the percentage that is lowest and improving that is going to have the biggest impact on the business's bottom line. Now, of course, I think this also is where the concept of work on your weaknesses instead of your strengths comes in, because you want to focus on the weaknesses, the weakest points, improve those just a little bit, and then it has the biggest mathematical increase. But the flip side is if you focus on your strengths, typically you improve. Like if your strengths is a quantity over quality kind of guy, typically putting in 1 unit of effort won't just double the number of leads, it will like triple it. Versus if you put it into your copy, your sales copy, you might put in 1 unit of effort and only increase your sales copy conversion by 10% as opposed to like doubling or tripling. So there's a lot of nuance when it comes to this, but this idea of boiling down the sales funnel into a series of percentages and finding the numbers that you have the highest confidence you can increase and attacking the lowest numbers or the lower numbers first is the first way. But if I'm looking historically at what I most often do with clients and businesses that I consult with, it almost always boils down to also finding the places in the funnel that have the largest delays. So if something takes 8 days or 3 weeks or something, finding those areas where like the delays are just way too long. And that is the typical boots on the ground approach.
With a approach of finding constraints and then addressing it with AI and say automation, we press to not just remove the repetitive nature of the process, but also try to ensure quality and consistency in the outcomes that we are trying to achieve for the stakeholders involved.
I'll give you an example of an area where we went through this process and ended up helping a business double itself. Actually, I think it's now up to triple where it was before. It was a VA company that I am supporting where they had a very good value proposition. Their VAs work better than pretty much most other VAs in the market. They have a fantastic support system, high loyalty, pretty much everything there. But a big chunk of its competitive advantage is finding the best people. A big chunk of its competitive advantage is all of its IP. It does a really good job of managing the VAs and guiding them with really good training. But the 50% is going to be the quality of the people. And so we were finding that the recruitment was taking between 2 to 3 months to find the folks. Sometimes it wouldn't find them ever, and just the client would have to drop off. And so we were expecting that the recruitment would have especially if we give ourselves a couple months, 95, 99% success rate, but we were seeing close to 50, 60% even after 2 months, and sometimes it would take up to 3. We then looked at that part of the business and found that the challenge was not that we weren't getting enough applicants. It was that the applicants weren't being walked through the process. So many of the applicants were falling off at random times. An email would be missed or something else. And so we added in automation into every step of that process, basically just with no-code tools, some things that anybody else could find out there. We use make.com, but most people will be more familiar with Zapier. But if you're wanting to try a new tool, if you already know Zapier, I definitely recommend Make. It's incredible. But we just set up integrations with the Zapier clone, make.com, and plugged it into our Notion database and then automated steps. So instead of having to write out an email or do a lot of repetitive steps, you just press a button in Notion. It would add an entry into a database, and that would automate a big chunk of our messaging sequences. And then upgraded the Notion database to remove the chances of somebody slipping through the cracks. It was really simple. Just anybody who was not touched in the last 2 weeks would show up in a report and who was responsible, and every single person was auto-assigned to a recruiter. So then every recruiter would see who had fallen through the cracks. And bam, we were able to, I think, triple the speed of recruitment, and the business has been able to take off from there. A lot of that is just automation. You can't add in AI. We have added in some AI into that, specifically in some steps of the process where the applicants will ask certain questions or need help at certain steps. We use AI in order to draft responses to their emails. We're also making a new AI that will read their resumes and score them based on the roles and responsibilities. But a lot of that's just a block and tackle of automation.
Helps clear things up. With AI, other key principles that businesses should consider incorporating AI specifically into their marketing strategy?
The number one thing that I think of when using AI in marketing is it can dramatically increase the personalization. Is there anything that you wish that you could find, let's say a data entry style job, so someone who did cold outreach or prospecting or mass outreach or other things, anywhere where you would have to just play a numbers game, those games have been totally changed now. We can use AI, massively increasing the personalization. I think that in the elections, I believe by the 2028 presidential election, every single person will get an AI written message saying that is tailored to them, tailored to their demographic and the concerns they have, with a custom message from the presidential candidate of choice, explaining how their program is going to be the best thing ever and solve all the world's problems, and that we're rapidly approaching that unit of time. And then what the presidential election does, because the stakes are so high, it's almost always cutting edge, and then marketers almost always follow. After Obama, everyone was using social media because Obama was using social media, so on and so forth. And so I think we're going to be hitting a level of personalization in messaging that has not been seen before with AI.
Would you say that the combination of AI and automation, especially with no-code tools, as you mentioned earlier, allows for a great deal of experimentation and creativity that we haven't quite tapped into as yet, and perhaps are yet to see?
I think that AI, especially these generative AIs, the image generative like Midjourney and DALL-E, and the text-based AIs like ChatGPT and Anthropic, they are ultimately a mirror to all the data they have seen on the internet. They're really a mirror to ourselves. And so you can see crowdsourced answers to questions. Yeah, essentially it's just another form of crowdsourcing. Now, they can combine ideas, therefore expressing true creativity, combining ideas that weren't there before, but it's still just the data they consumed from the internet. And so when seeing it as a repository of human knowledge and repository of all the data that it's consumed and really is a mirror of us, therefore, it can be insanely liberating how much creativity you can bring to the prompts that you write and to the outputs that you can end up getting. So I think that the range of creativity is really baffling.
That's interesting. Now, would you say that companies really are tapping into the data that they have available to them, and perhaps more importantly, not effectively using these language models to process the data that's unique to their organization?
Yeah, I'm of the theory that the best lens to be thinking about this stuff is inputs and outputs. is what are the steps in your operations, your fulfillment, your sales, what have you, where the inputs are clear and the output is clear. And then after you've solved for that problem, then you know the problem that you're solving, then seeing how much data you have that you can use AI. And the more data you have, the more consistent or effective the results of the AI will be. But you have to first approach it from the inputs and outputs point of view. That is different if you're building these AIs, OpenAI, and if you're the Googles or Microsofts, then they're using unstructured approaches. But if you're a business doing less than $100 million a year, you're going to be approaching this from a perspective of how do I actually solve this specific problem? Not how can I mine this for data. It's going to be like, how can I get this specific question out of the data, or how can I use the data this specific way? And then I find it's a lot more effective to be not thinking of it as a data problem, but instead inputs outputs problem, and then data comes later.
Okay. Could you give us an example of a problem that clarifies for us the inputs and outputs?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one I'll give you an example from HR, and I'll give you an example from sales. In HR, you might be in a process where a lot of people are taking up your HR's time by asking questions around policies or having specific edge cases that it's not quite clear how the documentation solves for them, etc. And the input in that case is really simple. It's a question that they ask, and that can be a written question. Then the output is going to be the answer. So the inputs and outputs are clear. It's all text-based. And the middle, and then the quote-unquote data is all your company's policies. So the data came afterwards, but then you can build a chatbot that has access to all your company's policies in what's called a knowledge base. So then when the user asks a question, it can then find the part of your knowledge base that answers it, feed that to ChatGPT. ChatGPT writes a custom solution that applies that to their specific problem and then gives them that answer. Another example would be in sales. If your, let's say your SDR or your prospecting team consumes people's LinkedIn, you can use a tool like Phantom Buster in order to review their LinkedIn to write them the custom messaging that your SDR otherwise would have done. So the input then is just the LinkedIn. You're not also finding them on other social media platforms. You're only targeting LinkedIn. The input's clear. You're seeing their roles and responsibilities. You're seeing all that other stuff. The output is the cold outreach message. And then you solve the data afterwards with a tool like Phantom Buster or some other scraping tool to solve for the data problem after the fact. But the input and output is what has to come first.
Thank you for that. And obviously the integration of things like sales and outreach to prospect systems is changing the game. I'm curious, you talked about the fact that we're probably seeing a greater level of personalization in the communications in such areas. Are there other challenges that you think businesses will face when automating customization, especially with the outreach and prospecting efforts?
Absolutely. I think there's two challenges that are going to appear. First of all, every time we have cheapened the ability to do communications at scale, society creates a defense mechanism to defend people's attention. People only have so much attention. And this is personally actually a thing that makes me really excited for some applications of Web3, basically penalizing bad actors from doing mass outreach by saying, yeah, you can send out 10 million emails spamming people, but it's going to cost you 1 Satoshi after the first 200 emails, something to that effect. I'm a big fan of Web3 technologies coming in to solve for this, but those technologies are still being rolled out now that the bubble has burst. I think they will still be coming, but it's hard to say how far they are out. Maybe it'll happen after that presidential election when it plays a big role. So that's one area, is that the filters are going to become a lot more picky. Secondly, is that people's social graces around this stuff is also going to be adjusted. So already, if you receive an email, you don't feel obligated to read the whole thing once you realize it's mass outreach. I think that's is going to go up to 11 moving forward when you realize you're seeing a larger paragraph that you realize was not written by a human. I think the only thing that really was making us as patient in a lot of situations as we were, and we were not that patient, but there was the social contract of, okay, you put in the effort to write this. Maybe I won't put in the effort to read it, but if I'm reading it, there was a give and take there. You put your limited, valuable attention to writing it. I'm putting my limited attention to reading it. But now if I read something that was written by AI, my response is generally anger. Okay, that the social contract was not held here. Maybe you wrote this without even reading it yourself and then sent it out. You've stolen my time. And it can, I think that is going to become more widespread. You see this a lot actually on YouTube. When ChatGPT first came out, all the YouTube channels made their 1 or 2 videos. This video is written by AI. And now those aren't out there anymore because nobody cares. And so I do think that is another factor at play where that in order to move forward in mass outreach, which is still something I'm a fan of, knowing that those future challenges are coming, we're playing arbitrage with the future and the future will adapt. I think that the focus on providing value and providing value succinctly is that need is only going to get bigger and bigger.
Oh,
People won't care about your big, fancy solution. They just want to know about how it concisely solves a problem that they have. And keeping your copy even shorter, even punchier, adding even more value, it's going to get you're going to get more and more competition in that, and the standards will have to just increase more and more. On the plus side, though, I think that all of a sudden people are going to get a lot more value from being contacted. Is that the net value is going to go up? Products and services are going to get cheaper, and society as a whole is going to benefit. But if you're looking to make a quick buck as a businessman, you're going to be eaten by the competition. That's the macro perspective that I have.
That's very interesting. I'd like to explore it a bit more. So maybe I can ask this. As we explore the concept of AI futurism, what implications do you see for the future of math and AI?
What was the first one? Math? Did you say?
I was saying that as you explore the concept of AI and futurism, what implications do you see for the future of marketing and AI?
Marketing and artificial intelligence. I think the biggest one is what I just said a moment ago, that people's defense mechanisms is going to dramatically increase. And I think that also the technology that is going to be built in order to help people's defense mechanisms is also going to increase. I think that everybody will get their own personal AI assistant. Like I said, AI is just inputs, outputs. So we're going to want an AI personal assistant that takes in as many inputs as humanly possible. It's going to take in all the inputs of all your communications and that are only filtering through things to you that are actually relevant to what you're what you're looking for, which has utopic and also dystopic implications. We're probably going to fall right there down the middle like we so often do. That's my theory. But that, I think, is going to have a massive impact. Another impact that I suspect is that there's this concept in security around like arms races, also in like evolution. So when you have two intelligent systems, there's an arms race of who can outcompete. As the deer gets faster, the cheetah gets faster racing after it. And there are certain areas, though, where we're going to find equilibrium. What do I mean by that? I mean that I remember when OpenAI announced they were going to try to build a platform that could detect text written by AI. And then quietly, we're recording this in October of 2023. I think this was about, I forgot exactly when, like 2 months ago, give or take. They quietly said, hey, we're actually abandoning this project. And I knew that they were going to, because that playing ground is not complex enough to create an ongoing battle. What that means practically is, okay, let's say they solve that problem. They can now they make a new AI that detects if it was AI written. The AI writer is just going to use that other model as the training data. So it's going to be trained to fight that. And that's fine. That's normal. How much text is out there? There's a lot. But if you're reading like an article, let's say it's like 1,000 words, every character is a different thing. That's not a large playing ground. There's only so many combinations there. And one of those AIs just has the advantage. Now, video-based AI, that might take significantly longer before the deep fakes get good enough to actually permanently defeat the AI, the deep fake detectors. I think that because that playing ground is just such a larger thing, it has so much more complexity, that arms race will probably last very long, maybe even ad infinitum. I'm not smart enough to say for sure. I expect it will eventually stabilize in favor of the deep fakes as opposed to deep fake detectors. But once you start creating detectors that exist in the real world, I think some of those, the equilibrium will never equalize, will always be an arms race. And I bring all that up to say that if you are using these AIs to create content and thinking about the consequences of getting through filters or providing the value to get through these filters, etc., just know that some areas will stabilize and others will be continuously dynamic. And at the end of the day, the thing you should be putting in all your focus is just make sure you're providing so much value that the system is benefiting you rather than not. The name of the game is to actually provide the value. This stuff's fun to theorize, but the bottom line is just provide a better product.
Sure. Then is there an aspect to that intersection of AI being agile and marketing that you find doesn't get much airtime? If so, or they?
That's a great question. Using AI in an agile methodology in marketing, is there an area where that does not get enough attention? I don't think I've thought through all three of those concepts and the dance between them in this particular domain, beyond the thing that I think is a little bit obvious, just that AI will increase our rate of how fast we create a new concept and then can read the results of the last sprint that we made, and then inform suggestions on the next sprint, and it will be a really good companion going through the sprint cycles of doing different marketing tests. I wish I could give a more unique perspective, but outside that obvious one, I think it's a great.
Right. And I know we've covered a fair bit of ground here, Garik, but is there something that perhaps I should have asked but haven't as yet?
This has been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Is there anything? No, I think we covered the biggest thing that I think is important for most entrepreneurs to realize is that if you think through your business from a inputs outputs point of view, break down all the departments into those inputs and outputs, find the bottleneck that is the biggest amount of constraint. If you can boil that down to clear inputs outputs, you can add in AI, which will dramatically increase your throughput there. If you're doing it well, it can also dramatically increase your quality. I'm not too worried about increasing consistency because everyone's so eclectic and unique. Maybe consistency is not the best goal if you have AI, but still increasing consistency and throughput. And that's the perspective you should take if you're asking yourself, I'm non-technical. How should I be thinking about AI? That's the process you need to be going through. Then finding the tools after the fact for that. So I think we covered that really well. And that's one of the core messages that I hope is helpful. And I can't think of anything else. It's been fantastic, Renee.
No worries. Thank you for this. If listeners are curious and want to find out more or connect with you, where would you recommend they hit?
Yeah, absolutely. My company uses AI, automation, and recruitment to transform our clients' companies to achieve breakthrough profit and ultimately get their businesses acquired at high valuations. And if that sounds like a good match, or you're building some new venture with AI and software, then hit me up on LinkedIn and just say you found me on the Predictable B2B Success podcast. And I'll be sure to accept your invite.
No worries. And sorry, your company's website is Valhalla.team.
That is correct. Valhalla.team.
Okay. We'll put links to that in the show notes. Garik, thank you so much for doing this. It's been a blast.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.